The 17 News at Sunrise podcast is brought to you by Clinica Sierra Vista. Working in the spirit of the Golden Empire, this is 17 News at Sunrise.
Good morning here at 5 a.m. Thanks for waking up with us. I'm Maddie Jansen alongside Alex Fisher.
5:01 is our time now, and 1 year ago today, rioters in support of former President Donald Trump charged the steps of the U.S. Capitol as Congress began counting Electoral College results. The ensuing chaos prompted law enforcement and the National Guard to mobilize in D.C. as a response.
Shortly after, crowds surged around the building. Both chambers abruptly went into recess amid the chaos. Lawmakers were given gas masks as police tried to control the situation inside. Violence erupted outside in the very spot where President Biden was eventually inaugurated 2 weeks later. 5 people died during the riot and its immediate aftermath, and hundreds have subsequently been charged with federal crimes, including some with ties to Bakersfield. Let's take you live to the Capitol building this morning, where President Biden and Vice President Harris are expected to deliver remarks in about an hour. Lawmakers will come together for a prayer vigil on the steps of the building later tonight. Former President Donald Trump had planned a news conference at his resort in Palm Beach, Florida, but canceled it on Tuesday. While D.C. remains under heavy security today, the Department of Homeland Security and FBI have said they are not aware of a specific credible plot or plan for violence. Today, we're taking a look back at the events of January 6th, 2021, and that day's impact across the country and here at home.
17's Maddie Gannon joins us in studio this morning with a look at how the political significance of the day, but a spotlight on the Golden Empire. Maddie, good morning.
Alex, good morning. Unsurprisingly, perspectives on the day split evenly down the majority of each party. But January 6th also stoked divide within the Republican caucus, posing a central question as the party looks ahead. Arguably nowhere else in the country, certainly no other single city, has a starker example of that inside its boundaries than right here in Bakersfield and Kern.
It was a day in the halls of Congress that went from a constitutionally required formality
let's walk down Pennsylvania Avenue
to an attack on the United States Capitol, the likes of which has never been seen before in America. Thousands of people rushed the U.S. Capitol building, breaking windows, assaulting police officers, and delaying the certification of the 2020 election results.
Last week's violent attack on the Capitol was undemocratic, un-American, and criminal.
A week later, the House Minority Leader from Bakersfield, Kevin McCarthy, denounced what happened that day, saying the former president and his close ally bore responsibility.
He should have immediately denounced the mob.
But then came the former president's second impeachment trial.
There must be truth and accountability.
And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
This time for his role on January 6th. That was the vote that split Kern's 2 congressmen.
A vote to impeach will further fan the flames of partisan division.
McCarthy voting no. Bakersfield's other congressmen crossed party lines. The Republican David Valadao joining only 10 other GOP House members in voting to impeach.
But you have to go home now. We have to have peace.
It was a vote indicative of the crossroads in which the Republican caucus finds itself. The question of how big of a role the former president will play in the future of the party, exemplified by 2 Republican congressmen right here in Bakersfield and Kern.
It's unfortunate we start with a committee chair who will tell you everything's on the table except the Speaker's office.
Then came the idea of a 9/11 style commission. The vote again, dividing Kern's 2 men in Washington. McCarthy voting no again. Valadao was a yes, saying it was needed to remove politics from the issue.
Pelosi has broken this institution.
Most recently, McCarthy has called the panel a partisan political tool, and Valadao has joined in some of those sentiments, still saying the American people deserve to know the truth about January 6th, but now saying the commission will only divide us further.
We have to enforce the laws regardless of the politics, regardless of what the crime was. That's what Congress should be spending time on, in my opinion, and I believe both those congressmen would agree.
As the nation marks a year since January 6th, The question of which direction the GOP will head going forward still remains. It's one of the biggest narratives driving American politics, and it's all playing out in Kern, a conservative-leaning county and one of the bluest states in the nation.
McCarthy himself could be called to speak in front of the commission for a phone call he had with Trump as the attack was unfolding. Valadeo and McCarthy's teams declined to comment for the story. In studio, Maddie Gannon, 17 News.
Thank you, and your time now is 5:06. Meantime, a Beverly Hills doctor who had been contracted at Adventist Health Bakersfield and was arrested after the January 6th insurrection is due back in federal court next month for a status conference. The criminal complaint filed against Dr. Simone Gold accuses her of entering a restricted building without authority and engaging in disorderly or disruptive conduct with the intent to impede, disrupt, or disturb a session of Congress. The complaint says photos and videos show a person who appears to be Gold attempting to push past officers, blocking the Capitol entrance, walking through different areas of the building, and giving a speech to a small gathering. She was also quoted in a Washington Post article saying she followed a crowd into the Capitol and later regretted being there. Adventist health officials said last year that Gold no longer works for them.
The attack on the U.S. Capitol did not just split Kern County's 2 congressmen. It split a nation, or rather widened a rift that had been growing for a decade. 17's Chris Burton spoke to an expert about how Kern County split and where we go from here.
Alex, the events of January 6th were on their surface about who had won the 2020 election, but an expert calls them a manifestation of a deeper divide, the polarization of facts, of information, of truth itself.
The insurrection on January 6th wasn't just another violent moment in our nation's history. It was an inflection point, a boiling over of tensions between opposing versions of truth.
January 6th is a physical manifestation of misinformation and unregulated information that has been out on the internet and in the world for a number of years.
Dr. Ivy Cargile notes that polling data on a Kern-specific response to the events of January 6th is extremely limited. But in the weeks following the attack, she saw in Kern much of what was seen across the nation. 2 held truths, driven by the voices in people's ears.
I think that what was seen in Kern County was a lot of an outward demonstration of those media bubbles that people are living in.
I spent a few hours trying to learn what truths folks in Bakersfield held about January 6th. One woman said it was disgraceful. Others said their views weren't politically correct enough for TV. But across the dozens of people I spoke to, none wanted to come on camera. Cargile says this is likely due to a fear of repercussions, personal or professional, from those that hold a different version of events as true. And over time, she says this could cause a split in how the events of January 6th are remembered.
I think there will be 2 public consciousnesses of this event, and the question is which one is going to be able to influence the social studies and history books.
That fallout won't happen on a national scale. Instead, like fights over vaccine mandates and LGBT rights we've seen in Kern County, that struggle will be hyper-local.
A lot of those individuals moved from, well, we didn't get to affect the situation at the national level, right? But we're going to take this to the state legislatures. We're going to take this to local governments like the city councils, like the school boards, and like the county supervisors' offices. And we're going to mount change there.
Only time will tell how January 6th is remembered in 5, 10, 20 years. But in all likelihood, there will be 2 different narratives. In studio, Chris Burton, 17 News.
Thank you, Chris. And here at home, the city of Delano will host a candlelight vigil today to remember those who lost their lives on January 6, 2021. The voters decide the election vigils scheduled for today at Delano City Hall from 4 to 5:30 p.m. Organizers say in addition to honoring those who died in the chaos of the attack on the Capitol, they're also protesting against attempts to chip away at the public's faith in elections and the democratic process.
Now to the coronavirus surge. With confirmation yesterday that state officials have extended the indoor mask mandate for another month. Health and Human Services Secretary Dr. Mark Ghaly announced the mandate set to end in 9 days is now in effect through February 15th. The mandate requires everyone to wear masks in all indoor public places, regardless of COVID-19 vaccination status. About half of the state's population lives in counties that do not have their own masking requirements. That includes Kern, which is seeing a spike in new infections.
Here at home, we learned more than 600 people have tested positive for the virus. The daily average has increased 190% in a month, most likely a result of mass holiday gatherings. Hospitalizations are not spiking as quickly as cases, but we are seeing a small uptick in new admissions. 144 people are in the hospital with severe symptoms of the virus, 33 being treated in local ICU beds. No new deaths were reported. With the rising number of infections, looking for a place to get tested is like looking for a needle in a haystack. At-home testing kits are flying off shelves at local pharmacies, yet finding a testing center with an opening doesn't get any easier. If the odds are in your favor and you're able to book an appointment, most likely it's for 2 to 3 days later. Urgent care clinics have become the go-to for test seekers, but even then, patients walking in are waiting up to 8 hours for a test. Dr. Kian Aziamin of Priority Urgent Care advises that tests should be administered within 2 days of showing COVID-19 symptoms. But with delays in testing, common sense should be used during this peak period.
Why are you testing? Are you testing because, you just went to a family member that has COVID and now 2-3 days later you feel horrible? Well, guess what? If they have COVID and you feel horrible now, you probably have COVID.
And what's the more popular reason, I guess, that you could say people are coming in for testing?
Right now, it's people that are symptomatic. Yeah, that's there's no question about it. It's the people that are symptomatic. Unfortunately, again, very high rates because of how infectious Omicron is.
Priority Urgent Care is administering between 300 and 400 daily tests at all 4 of their locations, with results coming back in about 3 days. Labs in Los Angeles are now helping with processing tests. Meanwhile, pharmacies we checked with are limiting the sale of at-home tests to 2 per household to meet the demand.
The Delano Police Department says it is no longer responding to non-emergency calls in person due to the rise of COVID-19 cases here at home. The department made that announcement yesterday. The department says officers will only respond in person to a life-threatening situation or if a crime is in progress. Non-emergency calls will be handled by an officer or community service officer. Dispatchers will determine the appropriate response for each call through a caller screening process. The changes will remain in effect until at least March 1st.
Starting today, all Bakersfield City School District schools are set to distribute students free at-home antigen rapid COVID-19 tests. The self-administered tests are optional for students and may be saved until needed if a student has not been exposed to COVID-19 when they receive their test. The rapid test shows results within 30 minutes. The test kits come with 2 tests. Students should take the first on the first day they experience symptoms and the second one about 3 days later. Positive tests must be reported to that child's school and they must then isolate at home. BCSD says parents and guardians can pick up a test kit at their child's school site. Parents with questions can contact the BCSD care team at 631-3234.
Now to an update on a shootout between a man and Delano police that left him wounded along with a police dog. Court documents state 34-year-old Eduardo Figueroa admits to shooting the dog and turning toward officers with a gun in his hand. That's when officers opened fire. Figueroa told investigators he shot the dog because he thought he'd get bit. Then he pointed the gun at officers because he'd shot the dog. Figueroa is charged with multiple felonies in connection with Saturday's shooting and is scheduled to be formally arraigned on Monday. He has a lengthy criminal record and multiple felony convictions and is a documented and self-admitted member of a criminal street gang. Figueroa was given medical treatment at the scene and taken to the hospital. And Delano police posted new photos yesterday showing canine Axel recovering after being sent home from the vet hospital. The post says Axel is doing awesome and receiving lots of love and support from the community as well as from his handler. Delano police say it's too early to tell whether Axel will be able to return to work, but they say they'll keep everyone updated on his recovery.
From our 17 News follow-up file now, the community is invited to attend the funeral services for a local brother and sister whose lives were cut short by a suspected drunk driver.
19-year-old J.J. Malone and his 10-year-old sister, Kaylee Brown, were struck and killed by a car last month on Panama Lane near South 8th Street. The driver, 46-year-old Lisa Kaur, is suspected of being under the influence at the time of the crash. The service is being held on Friday at 10 a.m. at Canyon Hills Church on Auburn Street in Northeast Bakersfield.
Working in the spirit of the Golden Empire, this is 17 News at Sunrise.
The 17 News at Sunrise podcast is a production of KGET and Nexstar Media Group. For more on all of the headlines in today's show, head to kget.com.